Good morning, rock stars, and welcome to the Aldebaran Quilt Along. My name is Holly, a Knight of String and Story, and it is my job to guide you to quilt with confidence. Now, y'all, if you are tuning in on Instagram, you will notice if you just peeked at my stories that I dropped a link up in my stories to join us over on YouTube. You are totally welcome to tune in here on Instagram, but it's a little bit easier to catch the replays, I think, over on YouTube. So I wanted to make sure that link was available. Those of you who are on YouTube and Facebook, welcome. I am so excited to be here with y'all. This is Aldebaran. Now, to give y'all a little bit of backstory, those of you who have been part of the Quilting Rockstars community for a while will remember this, but way back in 2018 and 2019, I swan dived down one of my lovely little nerdy rabbit holes and went on this whole journey of learning about a collection of stars called the Winter Hexagon. And it's what's called an asterism. And it's literally like a collection of stars that happens to make a shape. And it's not important enough to be a constellation, but it's something that folks sometimes reference. And one of those stars is Aldebaran. Now, as you may guess from the name, the Winter Hexagon has approximately 6 sides. It's a collection of stars forming this shape. It tends to show up during the winter, right? And I say tends to because depending on where you are in the world, like when you see it may actually be a little different. Good morning, those of you on Instagram. Who's here? I see y'all saying nice things. Hello, hello, hello. Hi, Jan. Hello, Terry. Hey, Peggy. Hey, y'all. So Aldebaran is the star, spoiler, at the bottom of that hexagon. And it is a very bright and very colorful star. So about the same time that I was going down this swan dive on the Winter Hexagon, I also happened to go to the zoo with Bonnie Hunter. Now, Bonnie Hunter is an incredible quilter, and she was passing through Atlanta on her way from somewhere to somewhere. I think she was on her way home from teaching somewhere, right? And she got stuck in the Atlanta airport and posted about it. And this was when my kids were still really little. And so I was home all the time and had a little bit more flexibility. And I texted her, I said, do you want to go to the zoo? And she said, yeah, that sounds great. Because we had just like a couple of hours that like her flight was delayed. She was checking out of a hotel, that kind of thing. And we went to the zoo and we saw these fabulous tortoises. And they also happened to have this fantastic hexagon shape on their shells. And the bottom of the hexagon was cool and striped. And so it felt like these worlds collided of this little deep dive I had been on of this collection of stars that had been inspiring a series of quilt patterns. And then going to the zoo and seeing this tortoise and being like, that's what it can look like. So as we have been returning to these quilt patterns, those of you that have been around for a minute, you know this is not the first time we've published Aldebaran, right? We have gone through, we've reworked the math, we've made it a way better pattern, and we are republishing it. But as we've been going back through, it's been really fun to be revisiting these origin stories as well. So now we get to make it together. Now, let me see who's here with me. I saw that Marcy tuned in on Instagram. Hello, Kate Brennan on YouTube or on Facebook, and Nicole on YouTube. I'm so glad that you are here. Yes, Nicole, I know that when we're getting started with these quilt alongs, it can take a second to find it. I also know that the link didn't show up on YouTube right away because I caught that this morning right before we went live. So thank you for being patient. And good morning, Jennifer. Good morning, Francie Joe. So, you know, all the more reason to give a little bit of backstory and give everyone time to join us. Now, what's going to happen over the next 6 weeks is we're going to make this quilt together. We're going to go step by step. And I am going to talk to you today all about choosing colors and fabrics, hence the lovely bundles here in front of me. The next week, we're going to talk about quilting. Not quilting, cutting. Normally, our Q&As, I was thinking about Q&As and cutting turned into quilting because I changed that opening sound. Anyway, next week we're going to talk about cutting, and normally our Q&As, this live video time where I demo and answer your questions, is going to be on Wednesdays, but I'm traveling this week, plus it's the kickoff, so it's fun to be here on a Monday. We're going to talk about cutting. This is a triangle-based quilt, right? So we're going to cut a lot of triangles together. We're going to talk about how to do that accurately. We're going to talk about how you may want to starch your fabric to make sure that those biased edges don't get all distorted, right? We're going to talk about how to then piece them back together without things ending up super wonky. Then the week after that, we're going to talk about how to make this string block, okay? So all your bits and pieces from your like the rest of your fabric will help make these lovely little string triangles that are going to go down in the bottom and add that little pop to this quilt. And then we'll talk about actually assembling these hexies, putting the hexies together with a Y seam. It's not as scary as somebody may have told you. And then, of course, we'll talk about quilting it. And at the very end of our quilt along, we're going to have a really special challenge called the Quilting Plan Challenge, where you can join me for some extra education all about how we're going to quilt this quilt and make that a reality. That's going to be really fun. That'll be right before Thanksgiving. It's going to be awesome. Okay. Now, a couple of housekeeping things. Okay. Let me just review for you. First of all, wherever you're watching me, if you're on Instagram, if you're on YouTube, if you're on Facebook, if you have not already liked, followed, subscribed, please do that. It'll make it more likely for you to get notifications when I'm live in the coming weeks. It'll also mean that as I put out videos, stories, content, etc., as good resources for you, that it'll be easier for you to find them. Okay. The next thing, and my folks on Instagram, I'm going to ask you to go to my link in bio to do this when we're done. My folks over here on YouTube and Facebook, I'm going to drop this in the chat for you. I know this is a weird angle that I have to be able to get over here. Marcy says YouTube is a better video, by the way. So if you are over on Instagram and you're having any trouble seeing me, pop over to YouTube at String and Story there as well. All right. Make sure you have liked and followed. If you have not yet signed up to join us, I've just dropped that link in the chat over on Facebook and YouTube. You can find it in my bio on Instagram. Signing up for the Quilt Along is totally free. Signing up means that you'll get reminders each week about what step we're on for making the quilt. You'll get some blogs emailed directly to you that are going to give you even more information and be a great resource once you leave this live video and you're actually going and trying to do the thing in your sewing room. And it'll just make sure that you have like all that handy dandy information. Okay. In order to participate, there are technically three things you're really going to need. So the first thing you're obviously going to need is you're going to need the pattern. This is available in both print and PDF versions at stringandstory.com. You will find a handy dandy link from that same blog that I just posted. So stringandstory.com, click blog, then you'll see the Aldebaran Quilt Along blog, or you can click the link that I posted in the chat and you can pick whether you want the digital or the print pattern. You will also want a 60-degree triangle template. And the easiest way to get one if you don't have one is by purchasing a set of Tri-Rex rulers. If you have recently done the Dogwood Blossoms Quilt Along or the Star Island Quilt Along with me, you already have this ruler, okay? And you get to use it again. If you have not yet done one of those quilt alongs with me and you don't have a Tri-Rex ruler, once you get it, you can also use it to make a Dogwood Blossoms or a Star Island. So this is a template that you're gonna get a lot of bang for your buck. You're gonna get a lot of use out of it. And you might as well go ahead and order that at the same time that you're ordering your pattern, okay? We are low on inventory on those. So if we run out, I will see how long it'll take us to get more, or I can help you find somewhere else to get it, okay? The final thing that you're going to need is some fabric. And we're here today to talk all about choosing colors and fabrics for Aldebaran. Now, Aldebaran is a 4-color quilt. You can see that more clearly on the pattern cover than maybe you can here. But there are 4 colors here. There's a mint green, there's aqua, there is like a cream, and then a gray, okay? On the cover of the pattern, we have aqua, navy, orange, and pink, okay? And you'll notice that colors 1 and 2 alternate with each other, and colors 3 and 4 alternate with each other on the diagonal, okay? You can also, though, make this with fat quarters. And in fact, every time I have made Aldebaran, I've made it with fat quarters. So before we dive into yardage versus fat quarters, let's talk about some considerations for what you may want to think about when it comes to colors and patterns. Now, this quilt has been loved and used and washed a bit, so it's faded a bit and it's harder to see the prints that are on here. But these are big triangles that we're going to be cutting out, okay? And it means that it's a really great opportunity to play with some really cool prints. Jan asked a great question. She said, are the setting triangles done with the rec part of the ruler? So Jan, this is a great question because strictly speaking, they could be, and I have made it both ways. What I have found is that when we're cutting these out, this is the way the pattern is written now, we're actually still going to use the tri, and we're going to cut big triangles to go here. And then we're going to trim it down because it gives us kind of one less really weird bias edge over on the side as we're going along. So if this gets distorted or anything at all, it's going to get trimmed off, and it helps actually make it a better square, if that makes sense. It's a really great question. Sarah says, does tri-rec ruler come in different sizes? Technically, yes. The standard size is up to about 6 inches. And that's what we're going to use for like what I'll be cutting with. I have seen ones that go up to like 10 or 12 inches. I think those are kind of big and unruly personally. So if you can get just like a standard 6-ish size, you're like, we need a 6-inch tri for what we're going to be doing. Okay. Great question, Sarah. So these are big triangles, as I just mentioned, which means this is a really great opportunity to use some of those larger prints that may be hanging out in your stash. They're going to still get cut up enough that it doesn't just look like you put a big piece of fabric in the middle of something. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of that look where, you just alternate stuff with like big squares. I like that my fabric, looks a little cut up and a little scrappy, but it's still a big enough size that you could get a nice chunk of a bold print. Like some Tula Pink or Kaffe Fassett in this would look absolutely chef's kiss, right? I've got some Allison Glass in both of my versions. I think that looks awesome. Ruby Star Society would shine beautifully because you'd really get to see the cool prints, but it also still see that it is pieced, okay? This is also a really great opportunity for some bold colors. Because of this funky triangle that uses this, in this instance, I did more contrast, but the way we've written the pattern, this actually uses your fabrics from your blocks, right? It means that everything is going to tie together because every block is going to have a little taste of all the other colors. Okay, so even where maybe you've got a little bit lower contrast between the blocks, you can create a nice pop and a nice coordination with that string pieced triangle. Okay, things to keep in mind. You may want to consider the fact that every color is going to touch every other color. So if you're going to think about contrast, making sure that you at least have contrast between the rows, right? So this is a more neutral row, and this row has a little bit more color. So I can see those hexagon shapes, right? Because on these 4 sides of the hexie, there's a little bit more contrast with the block in the center. So think about making sure there is some contrast. That contrast could be color, as I've done here, right? It could be value, right? You could do this all in blues, but have these two be darker blues and these two be lighter blues and have a value contrast. You could also do a scale contrast where some of these have much bolder prints and some of these have much calmer prints, okay? So make sure there is some contrast, but compared to some of my other patterns, Aldebaran is much more forgiving on that front, right? We have made some patterns together, Star Island, Dogwood Blossoms, Lanterns of Hope. Making sure there's appropriate contrast and distinction between your different fabrics is really, really important in those patterns. Aldebaran is much more forgiving because you've got this funky triangle that changes things up for you anyway, okay? Marcy says, would scraps work for string piecing the triangles? Yes. So that's another thing to keep in mind is you could always do fabrics here that are, and this is what I did on this quilt, right? That are different than the fabrics here, right? So I used very calm prints for my hexagons, and then I actually pulled a few other things in order to have a bolder look for that contrasting triangle. Great question, Marcy. Okay, I'm making sure I'm not missing questions as we go along. Any other questions about things to keep in mind? I feel like often when we're kicking off a quilt along, I have a lot to say to make sure that you understand where to make sure there's contrast. And like I said, Aldebaran is unusually forgiving, that you're going to have a hard time messing this up and not getting a cool effect because of the ways these blocks touch each other. Now, if you're wanting to think through possibilities, right, of what would look good, here are a few ideas. You could go for a vibe, okay? This quilt is a vibe. I literally started with, where is it? This blue seahorse fabric, okay, that my mom brought back from a trip to Hawaii. And I wanted to make sure that I used some of the fabric she brought me, right? She brought me a few fat quarters. It wasn't enough to make a whole quilt just from that fabric. I wanted to incorporate it into something. And so I started with that. I said, you know what? Let's go for beachy sea glass. Okay. And I went to my stash and I pulled things that looked like ocean foam and sand and beach water and, you know, the sky and the sand dune grass, right? Like I went and I pulled different fabrics that I thought all would fit that vibe. And then I looked at how much I had of each one, right? I had a lot more of these lovely, calm aquas, greens, grays, and creams than I did of my paps. And it was a fun opportunity to kind of be outside of my comfort zone. Y'all know this is not my usual. Y'all know I love an eye-searing quilt, right? But it was fun to take a vibe and have a quilt that I could channel that into and not have to worry as much about things like contrast, okay? The other things you could think about pairs of contrasting colors, right? So what would it look like if, let's say you're making a Christmas version of this, to have red and green, and then you could do gold and purple, but like what if you did 2 different reds and greens, and then you mixed some golds in with it in here to add that fun kind of Christmassy vibe, right? You could also do a color wash. This would look really cool with, you know, a kind of medium light to dark set of blues, greens, purples, whatever, and arrange them so it looks really sparkly, right? It's going to look kind of like Christmas lights, all sparkling, or twinkle lights sparkling. Like I said, this quilt is much more forgiving, which means too that if you have a fat quarter bundle sitting in your stash that you're like, it's a whole line of fabric, I really like the fabric, but there's not a lot of contrast going on. I know that's a conversation we have a lot, right? Of I bought this fabric bundle of an entire line, but within the line, it doesn't have a full range of contrast. And so you end up having to add other fabrics into the quilt that you're making to make sure that you have enough dark darks and light lights, right? But this quilt, it's okay if you don't have a lot of dark darks and light lights. You can get away with more of those medium tones by playing with color and print instead, okay? Nicole says, since mine will be scrappy, I pulled out my design wall for placement. I have no idea how it'll turn out, but here it goes. Nicole, it's gonna be great. My recommendation, if you're making a scrappy version, which we'll talk about as we talk about these bundles in just a second, is be prepared to make a couple extra blocks, right? And that way, if you need to swap some things around to make it look right, it'll be easy to do that. And we'll talk about this when we get down towards the quilting plan challenge a little bit. This is a great block to turn into placemats. You can square it off in the corners and add a little piano key border, and it makes a super cute placemat. So I would just consider, if you're going to go really scrappy, and that includes with our bundles, which I'll talk about in a sec, make a couple extra blocks, and that way you've got some options. Yeah, love it. Hi, Carrie. Sarah says, if using scraps, what size is needed? So for I would recommend that you're using like fat quarters for your blocks themselves. Even if you're going for a scrappy look on the block, you can use strings as narrow as 1 inch for these guys here. Yeah, great question. All right, other questions, y'all. Anybody? Then we're going to talk about bundles. Oh, as I get water onto my cutting table here. We're going to talk about bundles because I know that sometimes it's nice to just get something lovely and new. Okay. So what we have done is we have curated some fat quarter bundles for y'all in case you're wanting an excuse to, you know, get something a little fresh and new. Maybe nothing in your stash is speaking to you. Maybe you're just a fabulous human who wants to support a small business, and we love that. What we have done, so during the quilt along, we're going to be making these throw size. If you've got the pattern, the throw size is 36 by 55. It's on the small side for a throw, okay? And for the throw size, you need 12 fat quarters. Now, the next size up is twin size, and it's 72 by 88 and a half. It's kind of big for a twin, okay? And for that one, you would need 32 fat quarters. So what we did is we made bundles of 16. So this means that if you are making the throw size with me, you have some extra fabric because it's going to be very scrappy. Okay. You have some extra fabric so you could make some extra blocks and have some options like I was just talking about with Nicole about how you arrange these. But it also means that you could buy two and make that next size up. So we tried to make this so it would be like really easy that if you wanted to upsize, you don't have to pick out all your own fabrics still. And if you're a little nervous, you're a little uncertain, maybe you're nervous about the cutting or you're nervous about the Y seams, you know you have a little extra fabric. So it's gonna be okay. All right. Let's see. Jan says, I got the digital. Is that the most recent? Yes, it is. You're good. Marcy says, I love the idea of fat quarters in the background. I'll find scraps for work with the bundle. I love that, Marcy. So I'm going to talk you through each of the bundles that we have here, including a couple that will actually go up into the shop today that y'all are going to get first crack at. So this bundle is called First Thaw. Now, I should actually, you know what? I'm going to go through in order. I accidentally did a thing when I was making these bundles, y'all. And I was not necessarily trying to do a thing, but I ended up kind of going through the seasons that are coming up. So we'll actually start with this first one. This is Christine. Again, if you head to that link that I dropped in the chat, if you're on Instagram, if you head to the link in my bio, stringandstory.com, click blog at the top, and then you'll see the Aldebaran page under the blog, okay? And these are all linked. When you click through to buy kits, you're going to see them hanging out there, okay? So this is Christine. She is a very late summer, early autumn, right? You know, those bluebird days that we get in autumn where the leaves have kind of started changing, but it's still bright and warm and fresh outside, all right? 16 fat quarters. I will say we do only have one Christine available now. So this would be for the throw size. But if you love those fall vibes and you maybe potentially want to make a bigger one, this is red maple. Red maples are my favorite fall flower. I love how the trees turn from the outside in and they look just like this. If you have a red maple near you, go look if the leaves are changing. The outside leaves are red. And then we've got our golds and yellows as you come towards the center, and the closest to the trunk will still be green. And it looks so cool. Look, Francie, I know that you love fall. I know that this might be the one for you, right? This is all Ruby Star Society, speckled, starry, some lucky, a few other things hiding in there. Ta-da. All right. Then we, of course, are returning to Shiz and to Oz later this year. So we have a lovely For Good bundle so that you can lean into your favorite wicked themes. Pinks, purples, and greens, because who doesn't love, you know, all of those vibes, right? Then, of course, the holidays are coming. So we have some greens and golds. There's, well, greens and browns, more than neutrals, and reds and a little bit of purple for a pop. If you wanted to make a nice, rich holiday quilt, but also just nice jewel tones. Like I feel like depending on how you arrange this, it doesn't necessarily have to scream Christmas. It could just scream kind of those wintry jewel tones. Nicole says, thank you for the coloring page. I've had fun with the quilt and I'm trying to make plans for it too. I love that you mentioned that, Nicole. So I have mocked all of these up kind of lightly. When you go click on the listings, you'll see the fabrics, but then you can also go to the next photo and see these kind of digitally mocked up. But there's a digital coloring page on Pre-Quilt. It's linked from your pattern. It's linked from the pattern listing. So if you're working from your stash or if you're just wanting to play around with how you're going to arrange these, you can do that digitally and get an idea of what these blocks are going to look like. For the string section, you'll pick just one fabric. So for all of my mock-ups, I picked kind of stripy fabrics that matched the color palette to give you an idea of what that will look like. When you make it, obviously, you're going to piece it together, okay? Then once we get to the other side of solstice and we know that the daylight is coming back, the first flowers to come up around here are always the crocuses. So we've got a little bit of that kind of like late snow, late winter, dirty brown vibes, but then of course the beautiful purples and gold of crocus flowers coming up and heading into our first thaw, right? So this is a very wintry vibe, but again, winter as it's starting to turn. Maybe we're seeing the trees kind of start to rich up their colors a bit. We've got some leaves starting to poke out. flowers and buds starting to come. This is the bundle that I'll be using. I am so excited about this. It's a very similar vibe to this one behind me. If you like this vibe, this is the bundle for you. Okay, this is a very calm, chill energy. And then if you're a more is more, I want prints kind of person, this bloom kit, this is just full on. We're heading back into the warmer months. Lots of golds, pinks, yellows, creams, floral prints, all Ruby Star Society. It's going to be stunning. So those are all the bundles that are already online. If you have any questions about those, please give a holler. But we do have 2 more that are going to be going up this afternoon. I was hoping they'd be up before we were here together. But alas, life be lifing. I don't have a full story for these yet, other than they just really make me happy. And we were playing around with some colors in the shop. And I feel like this has a little bit of that same kind of late summer, early autumn vibe of like the last of the flowers, the last of the leaves, but also very calming. So if you like a nice range of colors, but all in very calming tones, that one's going to be for you. And this one is a party. This is burger night, right? We got French fries and bold colors up in here. There's actually some burgers in here as well, some splatters. So if you're wanting a funky, whimsical, if you liked that Snack Shack Sawtooth Star quilt that I make, but you want it like one notch less wild, this is the one for you, right? Because you could do all your blocks with the solids and then just use the prints in your stripies, and it would be so fun. So burger night will be up later as well. Yeah, so here's the bottom line with this. Normally when we have these conversations, we are having a lot of chit chat about how you need to really think through the contrast and your fabric placement and your print placement and whatever quilt we're going to make. Aldebaran is very forgiving. What we're going to focus on in Aldebaran, rather than so much the fabric and the prints, is we're going to focus on working with the fabric. How can you prepare your fabric for successful, accurate cutting? How can we handle those triangles that have these bias edges on them and sew them back together without distortion? How can we put these hexagon blocks together with a successful Y seam? Y'all, it's not nearly as scary as you may have been told. Like if you have ever been told that Y seams are scary and so you just avoided them, we are busting that myth together, okay? This is going to be so much simpler than you think it is. Again, so much more forgiving than you think it is. And then we're going to square it off into a gorgeous quilt together. So thank you all for joining me. Thank you for being part of the Quilt Along. I am so excited to make this together. I'm excited for this quilt to be back out in the world. It's one of my favorites. I think it's such a fun opportunity to play with big prints, which is one of my very favorite things. So like I said at the very beginning of our time together, make sure wherever you're watching this, you've liked, followed, subscribed. It'll make it easier for you to find the resources as we continue along. Be sure to head to stringandstory.com and register for the Quilt Along if you have not already. You'll see the banner. You can go to find it on the blog. There's lots of opportunities to make it easy for you to find that sign up. And from that same sign up page, you'll see links to be able to get your pattern, your Tri-Rex ruler, and your fat quarter bundle so that we can start cutting next week and make these gorgeous quilts a reality. All right, y'all, you are fabulous. I'm excited to be here. We're gonna have a great time as the weather starts to cool off and become a little chillier, starting to make a cozy, cozy quilt. I will see you back in your inboxes next Monday with some more resources on cutting. And I will see you back here next Wednesday at 10 a.m. to actually cut our fabric together. Bye for now.